A good day to all and welcome to FMC's Midweek Devotion. I am Isaiah, pastoral team member for the youth ministry here at Faith. And for today's devotion, we're going to be looking at the book of Philippians, chapter 3, specifically verses 17 to 19. But before all that, indulge me a little bit as we talk about movies, right? So in my free time, I like to watch movies, sometimes. And I think I go back and forth between these two specific genres. I go with spy thrillers and superhero movies. And in most of these movies that I watch, right, what I particularly enjoy is when we see our main character being trained or taught or brought up by a mentor figure, right? And they are being trained to do the best and to be the best that they can be, right? It's like Batman being trained by Ra's al Ghul in Batman Begins, Ethan Hunt trained by Jim Phelps in Mission Impossible, Peter Parker learning from Dr. Octavius in Spider-Man 2, Shang-Chi learning from his father Wen Wu in the movie Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, and the list goes on, right? Now these main characters, they all go through some form of training or learning from their mentor, be it through a hardship or just developing that genuine mentor-student relationship over time. And in the process of it, right, in the process of this learning and training, the main character, would naturally start to look up to the said mentor, right? Some even begin to take on the traits of said mentor and begin to emulate or imitate their mentors. Their eyes are always fixed on the mentor to try to pick up as much as possible all the nitty-gritty things to learn and to follow in their example. And I think that's great, right? To have a role model in our lives, in our growth journey and all, it's great to have that. And Paul too also urged the church in Philippi in our scripture text to emulate him just as he emulates Christ. He's offering himself as a model on how to stand fast as a Christian. Verse 17, brothers, join in imitating me and keep your eyes on those who walk according to the example you have in us. It certainly is good for us to, if we know who we are following, right? If the role model turns out to be someone who's good, someone who says they are. But I say this because as it turns out, all these mentors I referenced previously, it turned out, not so great after all. They ended up being villains of their respective movies. They became the big baddie that the main characters had to fight in the end, very sadly. But it's a twist that our main characters would not have seen because they had their focus on other things, right? And they could not see the mentor for who they truly were. They had taken all the behaviors and the actions of their mentors as normal in that sense. They had taken their mentors for granted. Now, if only they had some kind of warning prior, right, to warn them to be careful, or maybe even to help them change their perspective and to make sure that they're following the correct kind of role model. Now, interestingly enough, right, circling back to what Paul was writing in his letter to the church in Philippi, Paul actually does that. He gives the church a warning of the current state of things. Of the dangerous pagan behaviors that were seen as normal or that were taken for granted during that time. Verses 18 and 19, for many of whom I have often told you and now tell you even with tears, walk as enemies of the cross. Their end is destruction, their God is their belly, and they glory in their shame, with minds set on earthly things. And it is through this warning that Paul is urging the church to think differently, to start to see things from a godly perspective, with a capital G. Paul is essentially teaching them to look with new eyes at the current state of things and to think and to see what it truly means to be Christ followers. Now, how is this still relevant to us today? Well, just think about it. With so many different influences that we have in our lives now, Instagram influencers, Facebook, all the videos on TikTok, what have you, all of these things dictating how to live our lives, And whether we realize it or not, right? Sometimes we do end up heeding such advice and following after these role models, so to speak, myself included sometimes. Now, it's not to say that everything out there is bad, right? But I'm not sure how discerning we are about such things. Are we actually checking to see if they're in line with what Scripture tells us? Or are we beginning to take these prescribed behaviors and actions from these external influences as normal and to make them the only model for us to live by and to copy, to emulate? Where is our focus today, and who are we following? Friends, I urge us today, and even as a reminder to myself, to perhaps stop and take stock of what we are doing these days, right? What we're following and looking at these days. To try and look at things from a new perspective, and if we have to, shift that perspective in the right direction. Let's shift our perspective towards Jesus, and let's think again what it truly means to be a Christ follower. Copycat? No. Copy Jesus.